Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's worldwide guest speaker lecture on nurturing the spirit of the child with Dr. Lawrence Palevsky. Dr. Lawrence Palevsky is a renowned New York State licensed pediatrician and known for his holistic approach to child wellness. He started his career after earning a medical degree from the New York University School of Medicine and completing his pediatric residency at the Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City. His practice blends holistic and integrative approaches to child health care, focusing on areas such as preventive health, nutrition, and mindful parenting. Today, Dr. Palevsky will explore the essential elements of holistic child development and discuss how caregivers can support a child's spiritual and emotional growth alongside their physical health. We have the opportunity to gain valuable knowledge that will empower us to better nurture the spirit and health of children in our life through his unique perspective on challenges and opportunities in pediatric healthcare, emphasizing the importance of treating the whole child. So please welcome Dr. Lawrence Palevsky.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for that introduction, Rike. Thank you, Angela, and thank you for inviting me to speak with you tonight. Nurturing the spirit of the child is a conversation that really comes from the deepest parts of my heart. The information that I share is very personal, and it's very personal because it comes out of my own personal process of figuring out how to nurture the spirit of the child myself. It's also just out of my practice of being with kids and trying to understand who kids are and to understand how they develop at different stages of their life. So what you're going to hear is really a lot of my own personal process mixed in with some clinical pearls and material that I learned just being a pediatrician. So when I think of nurturing the spirit of the child, I try to look at it as how do we reach who the child is at his or her highest good? And what is in the best interest of the child? Now, when children are born, they start out life with predominantly a reptilian or primitive brain. And the essence of that brain is very fight or flight. It's very survival mode. There's no thought in the brain. It's all impulse and primitive reflexes. So the majority of what babies need is food, love, and care. And when babies are born, they don't know that they are human beings. They don't know that they are beings at all. In fact, at the time that a baby is born, the baby is pretty much merged with the mother and the mother merged with the baby. There is no separation. And so the womb is somewhat extended for the first couple of weeks and maybe a month or two. And so that merge state, that area of initial time after birth is extremely important. And what I teach every new family in my office is babies don't have object permanence. So those of you who are on the call tonight may not have visual contact, auditory or hearing contact, smell contact, taste contact, or feel contact with members of your family, loved ones, and friends. But you know that they exist. You know that they're somewhere in the world, whether in another room, whether in another part of the city, whether in another country, you know that they exist. And that term is called object permanence. Well, babies are not born with object permanence. So you can never spoil a baby because a baby doesn't know he or she exists unless there's the reflection of the mom. So the baby needs the sight, the smell, the taste, the sound, and the feel of the mother. Also the spouse. I mean, I don't want to leave out the spouse. but the baby needs that constant connection. And you're going to hear me talk about connection a lot because, one of the things that I looked at in my own personal life as well as professional life is where does addiction and habits come in families that are seemingly very loving? And every bit of literature, and even in my own process, the pain of an addiction, the pain underneath the habitual practices is really about lack of connection. And so when I really understood that from my own personal life, I started to see pediatrics in a very different light because I started to really, really, really understand the importance of connection and acknowledgement and bonding, especially very early on. Babies come out of the womb not knowing that they exist, not knowing that they're separate, not knowing that they're other than mother. And they need sight, smell, taste, hearing, and feel. And so this idea of sleep training makes no sense to me because babies need that contact. They need to feel that they're connected to. And again, you can do it with the sight, with the smell, with the taste, with the sound, or with the feel. Now, eventually, a baby must move away from the mother. And for all the mothers out there, I know I just gave you a little bit of a stomach punch because it's a very difficult thing for a mom to deal with that separation. And it's a lifelong separation. It's a lifelong dance between the umbilical cord and the separation. And it's not a judgment, it's not a criticism, it is. It's just a dance that every mother must do to allow for that separation. And the baby has to separate to know the world. And the first thing that babies do when they separate is develop their eyesight. So it's the movement of the eyes that become their first real connection to other than mother. And the first stage of a baby's development after that merged state with the mother is a very magical consciousness. And what I mean by magical is everything is new. Everything is wow. Everything is awe. Everything is It's all wonder. And what I want to describe, and this is where I get a little technical with the families in my office, because babies don't care that there's a name to what they're looking at. That's a concept. That's not where their brain development is. Their brain development is merely observation. That's it. So if they have a pen in front of them, they don't care that it's pen. They don't care that it's plastic. They don't care what it does. They don't care how it works. They don't care what the color is. All they care about is object, thing, other than mother. And so their very first separation from mom is full of magic because it's all new. And it's not descriptive. It's not a story. It doesn't have definition. It doesn't have narration. It doesn't have description. It doesn't have labels and facts and information and soliloquies. It's just wow. And what I like to do when I see babies, because this magical part of consciousness really stays in place for most of our lives. But it is the first piece of development outside of the merge of the mother, the other than mother, the separation from mother. It's very magical. It's full of observation, discovery, exploration, examination, but it's really about being with something other than mother. And we as adults have a real hard time just human being, especially with kids, because we want them to like something, we want them to know something, we want to describe something, we want to tell them what it is, we want to download the encyclopedia into them as soon as they start realizing there's a life other than the womb. But they don't require it, they don't need it, and in fact, it doesn't work. And so when I see babies, I really try to get parents to just be. And if there's an object that a child is looking at, let them see it. And when they're close to 4 or 5 or 6 months and they want to hold it, let them have the experience. Certainly, sound and vision are the first sensory experiences into the world besides taste. But then when the baby is able to voluntarily move the arms in a coordinated way, they're going to want to hold it. And their first thing to do with it is to look at it. And even before an object, what does a baby do? A baby takes the hand that comes in front of the face and just like crosses the eyes like, whoa, right? But that's not a descriptor. That's just an experience. So if I saw a baby doing that, I would just stay with the baby. Wow, wow, I see you found your hand. Not, yes, that's your hand. And your hand does a lot of things and it has 5 fingers. And on the 5 fingers, there are 5 nails. And if you take your hand and the babies are not there. That's not their consciousness. And so I often will use this juxtaposition of questions. Do you want your child to see the world through your eyes? Or do you want to help your child to see and understand the world through his or her eyes? And almost every parent I work with says the latter. But if you really take a step back and watch your parenting, you're doing the former. Because you're just downloading everything because you want your kid to know things and know things and know things. But kids don't learn by what you tell them. And in fact, what is the most common complaint that parents have about kids? They don't listen. And the reason they don't listen is because we're telling them what to do. And instead of understanding how they do things. Don't leave, Laura, because there's plenty of stuff here for adults, even if you don't have children. You'll see. You'll see. Bear with me. Have patience. So the baby's first foray into the world is full of awe, magical. And so when I see a baby 2 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, I just stand there and be present and connect to the baby. I may not even do anything. I certainly rarely say anything. And occasionally I might just go like this. And what I want to do is engage the magic of the baby, seeing something for what they perceive as the first time. And all I hear around me are people saying to the baby, to the 2-year-old, to the 4-year-old, say hi to Dr. Larry, say hi to Dr. Larry, say hi. Aren't you going to say hi? Say hi. Do you want your children to see the world through their eyes? Do you want your children to see the world through your eyes? Or do you want to help guide them to understand the world through theirs? And so knowing that children don't learn by what you tell them, they learn by imitating. They learn by copying. They learn by modeling. I might say hello to the parents and watch to see what the children do because they're in awe. This is to them is their first time. Even if I saw them at 2 months, at 4 months, it's new again. And so that magical place is nonverbal. It's non-story. It's non-description. It does not have any concept at all. It's purely sensory, observation, and experiential. And that's very hard for us as humans because we don't like to sit in a magical place of just being and observing. But that's exactly where babies are. And in fact, that part of babies never leaves us, but we leave it. And it's so important for us to be able to have that part of our own development resurrected, rekindled, to be able to look at that baby and look at life and go, oh, and just feel what that's like without, oh, that's a vase and that vase was built and that was made by this person. No, I don't care. Babies don't care. Their first exploration of the world is just to have a sensory experience. Whether they can see or hear or not is still, they're still looking for a sensory experience. And that magical state of consciousness continues for life. And then all of a sudden, the baby starts vocalizing. And even if the vocalizing is not clear, it's not words, the baby is starting to develop the next phase of consciousness, which is the mythical consciousness, which is the story, right? They see something or they see someone, and all of a sudden they start making sounds because they want to communicate, even if it's not words. And so that discovery leads to the interest in expressing him or herself. And that mythical development continues well up until the child is fully verbal. And if you watch, a 3-year-old child really crystallizes the mythical, the magical and the mythical consciousness of development. Because the 3-year-old is all about the story of I. You go to say hello to a 3-year-old, and the 3-year-old doesn't say hello. The 3-year-old says, I have new shoes, or I have a baby brother. The story of I is very much about fantasy, creativity, of making stuff up, of telling little lies, of not saying things correctly, of doing things incorrectly. So children are supposed to do what they're not supposed to do. That's how they learn. And if you tell a 3-year-old to be careful, that's too much past their pay grade because that's a concept. They don't learn because you feed the front of the brain. They learn because they have a voluntary movement into the world to have an experience. And so when children are in my office and when I'm around children, I understand they're supposed to do what they're not supposed to do. All my responsibility is to keep them safe. Other than that, go for it. Because I want them to explore. I want them to have an experience. I want them to see what happens when they choose to do things. Because they're in an explorative, magical, storied state. And this really crystallizes most of the first 5 to 6 years of life. Because one of the things that happens when kids are closer to 3, 4, 5 is they start telling little white lies. Well, they're supposed to, because they're in story. They're not in concept. And so many, many years ago, a 3-year-old boy said to me, "Dr. Larry, what's this?" It was my stethoscope. And I said, "I don't know. What do you think it is?" And he said, "A stethoscope." Now, how would I have known what he saw through his eyes if I downloaded the answer into his head? And a kid, maybe a couple of weeks later, asked me the same question. "Dr. Larry, what's this?" "I don't know. What do you think it is?" A heart listener. Wow. How would I have known the creativity? How would I have known the story in this child's head if I had given the answer? And so 3-year-olds are supposed to, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, they're supposed to make stuff up. It's that wondrous, creative, mythical world. It's the Santa Claus world. And I have a saying in my practice that I don't answer kids, I don't correct kids, and I let them figure things out for themselves. Because if I answer them and I correct them, they never know how to figure it out themselves. So if a child says to me in my office, or if I say to the child, "Do you draw?" "Yeah." "Which hand do you draw with?" The child raises the hand, and immediately the mother says, "No, that's not right." Now, I certainly had a visceral response to that because the 3-year-old doesn't have to get it right. The 3-year-old needs to be creative and tell a story. So I would look at the kid, and I do look at the kid, and I say, "Are you sure? Okay, here's a crayon. I want to see you draw." And so I would let the kid have the experience rather than correct the kid. Because I want to guide the child to say the right thing. I don't want to tell the child what the right thing is. And I have this very, very famous story that I tell as much as I can. If a child looks at this folder and says, "Dr. Larry, that's a great blue folder," 11 out of 10 parents would correct the kid. You know that. But I don't. Because I know the child is in the mythical, magical stage of consciousness, not conceptual. That's not yet. So I'm not explaining anything to kids, which almost every parent does, because we want to download the encyclopedia into their head. So I'm going to look at the child and say, "Green, blue? You think this is blue?" "I don't know. I don't know. I have a feeling it's a different color." "If you think this is blue, what color is this on my shirt?" And so what I like to do is share an experience with children and with adults rather than correct, rather than narrate, explain, and put down. Because children are supposed to make mistakes. They're supposed to get it wrong. They're not supposed to know the answer. And what I was taught as I did my own personal work in order to relate to someone else is, "Isn't this picture nice?" is different than saying, "I like this picture. What do you think?" And that's the same thing with correcting a kid versus sharing your experience and giving your kid the chance to figure it out. And so the mythical state is so vast. It's so full of imagination. It's so full of wonder and creativity. And it's really a time when the child is truly figuring him or herself in story in relation to the world. So the magical consciousness is the child's first foray into having a sensory experience with the world. The mythical consciousness is when the child begins a story and personal relationship into the world. That's why when people say to me, well, my kid is 18 months and he's not socializing with other kids. Well, yeah, that makes sense. He's 18 months. He's still in a very magical place. And what you watch with an 18-month-old, they'll hold something and walk around for hours holding it because their first foray into the world is very physical. It's very sensory. It's very territorial. Kids don't learn to share until close to 3. I cringe when I see twos programs because the same thing. Those kids need to not be around other kids because they play in parallel, not together. If anything, it's too stressful for them. So babies start from a place of merge, and then they explore the world in a physical, sensory way and an emotional way. And then to go on top of that is their wanting an experience in story, in creativity, in imagination, in wonder, but not in concept. And so I would never teach a 3-year-old, this is a pen. And I once saw a mother in my office who was seeing another practitioner have the kid, maybe the kid was 12 months, 11 months, 13 months, sitting on her lap. And she was doing the following, because there were other kids playing on the floor. Book, car, boy, truck. Now that's narrative. That's conceptual. And the front of the brain in babies is not fully developed. In fact, it doesn't develop until maybe 25 to 30 fully, and then continues into middle age and older age. But the front of the brain doesn't develop because you feed it from the outside. That's not how it develops. It develops from the inside. It develops from children having that magical experience and then having a mythical story to go with it. And then the guidance by the adults who say, somebody told me this is a pen. I don't think it's a pencil. Versus, this is a pen. This is a pencil. That's not how kids learn. They don't learn conceptually until closer to 6, 7 years of age. And that's the mental state of consciousness. The mental state, facts, information, concepts, knowledge, understanding. That's how they start. And then what they do is they take all that magical and mythical consciousness exploration and they form it into explanations, stories, and even paragraphs of stuff. And then we knock it out of them, kill it. We kill the magical and the mythical. And if we want to raise kids who truly develop the ability to figure things out, we have to let them go through the magical and mythical explorations so that they can develop their own mental consciousness. And one of the things that, I watch parents literally narrate the world to the kids. Similar to that mother who was pointing out all the items. Because what she did was she missed the state of consciousness of the kid. The state of consciousness of the kid was all magical. Because if you watch the kid sitting on the mother, the kid was just like this, just watching and taking it in. And I'm reminded many years ago, I was walking in Manhattan and I was going to an appointment, and this 2-year-old boy was standing on the street. He appeared to me. And there was this very, very tall man who was doing a magical, mythical exploration with him. The man was doing the duck voice. And he was speaking in words, and it was so clear, but using the duck voice. And I will do what the kid, I watched the kid for a couple of seconds, and I'm going to do what the kid did. Mesmerized. The kid was glued because he was having a magical experience. And the mother was standing there doing the following. He's good, right? This is fun. Isn't he good? Don't you like him? He has a really good duck voice. And she's just narrating the whole thing on and on and on and on and on and on. And I watched the kid who didn't budge. And I was so grateful for the kid that he didn't go into the mental place, because he can't, and was just engaged in that magical, mythical place. And similarly, I saw a little over a 2-year-old girl on an airplane once sitting at the window with the dad in the middle and the mother in the aisle seat, and I was at the aisle seat behind them. And the kid was just looking out the window, and all of a sudden the plane starts to move. And the father did the following. Oh, we're moving. We're getting faster. Oh, wow, look how fast we're going. We're going really fast. Oh, we're getting off the ground. Look, we're going into the air. Look, there's the buildings. There's another building. There's the water. You see the clouds? And he just keeps narrating. And if you watch the kid, I wonder what the kid sees. But the father didn't wonder. He was fully in a mental place of just downloading. My kid's going to know because I'm describing everything. The front of the brain, the mental, the facts, the information, the concepts, the knowledge, the understanding, the problem solving, the figuring out, doesn't happen unless the back of the brain moves forward. And the way the back of the brain moves forward is you get out of the fight or flight response and you have an experience by engaging in a voluntary movement. And that's why toddlers will open and close something 100 times. Because what they're doing is creating nerve tracks from the area of the brain in the back that monitors muscle movement and coordination and voluntary movement, that then sends signals to the midbrain, which then has the experience. And why does the child do it again? Because the nerve track going from the back to the middle doesn't get colored in with one stroke. It needs repetition to form the track. And then once the kid does it over and over and over again, the front of the brain says, I got it. I get it. And that's how the forebrain, the higher brain, begins to develop. And that's where children develop self-worth, confidence, and safety in the world, because they're able to explore, have an experience, non-verbally, so that they can learn and figure something out. So what happens if you're an adult who does it for your kid? Who says, I don't want my child to struggle. I don't want my child to feel bad. I don't want my child to fail. What you basically do is take away the hindbrain to midbrain development. Because in the midbrain development, in the having the experience, there's a physical experience, there's a sensory experience, and there's an emotional experience. And we all need to be able to have all experiences. And you can't have it if you're getting in the way of the child having the experience, or if you're explaining it, which they're not ready for. The only way we really know things is if we allow the hindbrain to come out of fear and fight or flight, which it does, starts to as soon as the child separates from mother, has a midbrain experience, physical, sensory, and emotional, and then does it enough times through trial and error, research, that the child then says, I get it now, and then we'll tell you a story about it. And if it's wrong, you might say, that's interesting. I wonder if you want to try that again. Or I think it might be this. Have you thought of this? Instead of, no, that's wrong. This is what the answer is, and I'm going to give you 50 million reasons why. Children and adults don't process things very easily. And certainly children process things very slowly. And so what I notice over the last 20 plus years is that I'll say something to a child, little more than a toddler, less than a grade school kid, and I'll say something. And I will wait, because I know children don't have auditory processing very quick. So I'll wait. I'll hold their gaze. I'll stay present, and I'll wait. And in 1.3 seconds of them not answering, the parent repeats what I say. Multiple times. Like, I'll say to a kid, all right, come over to the wall. I want to measure your height. And the parent will say, go over to the wall so Dr. Larry can measure your height. And I'll say, okay, I'd like you to put your feet up against the wall. The parent will say, put your feet against the wall. 100% of the time, in everything. And that's our current and not so current parenting skills. I, being from New York, have used my New York sarcastic humor at times. And I will say to the parent who keeps repeating what I'm saying, I speak English, don't I? Because it's so invasive to the child. And it doesn't allow the child to develop a relationship with me in the parent's presence. Do you want your child to see the world through your eyes? Or do you want to hold space to guide, to assist your child to figure out the world through his or her eyes? And so the reason I teach this, and the reason, I'm so passionate about it, is because the front of the brain cannot develop unless we have experiences over and over again. And it cannot develop unless we struggle. And it cannot develop unless we fail. And it cannot develop unless we toil. It cannot develop unless we get it wrong. It cannot develop unless we go through the mud. And by making it easier for kids, by answering for them, by correcting them, by doing it for them, we essentially take away front brain development. And I will tell you, that is a master plan. If any of you are conspiracy theorists, this is the time to listen, because that is the master plan. The master plan is to keep kids from developing their critical thinking. It's the master plan through education. It's the master plan through cell phones. It's the master plan through apps. It's the master plan through social media. It's the master plan through iPads, video games, computers, and devices. It's the master plan with childhood injections. It's the master plan with foods and processed foods. It's a master plan because when we engage with all those things that essentially damage the back of the brain does not develop forward. And so what ends up happening is the back of the brain presents the child in panic, fear, anxiety, and impulse and reactivity, survival. But that's the infant brain. And that infant brain is supposed to move away from it as it becomes magical and mythical and mental in its progression of development. And so one of the things that I have looked at, especially over the last 4 years, is how did we get to a place in the world where people just obey authority, stay in panic mode and fear, and refuse to think for themselves. And essentially, what that equates to is the hindbrain stays dominant, the fight or flight response runs the body, and when that happens, the front of the brain physiologically shuts down. And so in order to know something, you have to rely on the information to come from the outside. And so what happens is, if you create an injured hindbrain through in utero practices and medications and bad foods and childhood injections, you run the risk of not allowing that hindbrain to move forward in exploration. And then you run the risk of not allowing the front brain to develop thinking, figuring it out, concentration, focus, attention, patience, curiosity, beyond just sitting there and being curious. And so I said to myself, how did we get to a place where so many people in the world shut off their front brain? And what I realized was part of it was the way we've brought our kids up. And so if we really want to nurture the spirit of the child, get out of the way. Be safe, but get out of the way. let them get it wrong, let them make mistakes, make them figure it out themselves, let them explore, let them have experiences, let them struggle, let them cry, let them go at it again. Because when you're not there, no one's going to do for them what you're doing, which is going to create a level of anxiety, panic, freeze state beyond belief, which then is a perfect setup for the front of the brain to only function because of what the outside says. And so if we want critically thinking, functional people who are not relying on a computer or a phone or a video game to fix their lives, we have to let kids figure things out for themselves. We have to let them be street smart. And you're not going to do it by dumping the world into their lives. And you're not going to do it by fixing things for them. You're not going to do it by correcting them, answering them, and just doing their life. We have to feed them better. We have to question what we're doing when we put injections into their body, because it damages the hindbrain terribly, because it's the most rapidly developing part of the brain. And it prevents forward brain development. And so when you prevent forward brain development, you stay in fear, you stay in anxiety, you stay in panic, and you only have as a resource the outside world to tell you what to do. And so I really struggle when I watch parents who are really good parents, who are orchestrating every single moment of the child's life, managing the moments and breathing the breaths for them. And the thing is that this stage of magic to mythical starts all over again at the beginning of adolescence. And then many years ago, 20 some odd years ago, I had a grandmother come up to me. I mean, I was in my early 40s. And you know, grandmothers love to wag their fingers. And I was so tickled by it, you know? And she said to me, tell the parents in your practice that how their children are during toddlerhood is exactly how they'll be as adolescents. And she was right. The magical, mythical, the development of I, the story of I, the exploration, the wonder, the examination, the exploration ramps up in adolescence. And a real desire to identify I in relation to others amps up. And that's where sex, drugs, and rock and roll become very different than a chair falling off a chair or pulling a tablecloth off a table. So the safety levels change, but the issues are the same for adolescents. Magical, mythical, and then this mental capacity that goes beyond anybody's comprehension. Because we all know, and I remember at 15, I was the smartest person in the world. And I'll tell parents, and I'll tell kids, you are the smartest person in the world. You're right. You are. So it's really important that we change the way we're parenting, especially based on brain development, and especially based on the states of consciousness of each age and what children need in order to grow and mature and develop that forebrain that differentiates us from all other mammals in the ability to have higher brain function. Learning is not what somebody tells you. Learning is what you figure out on your own. So I'll stop there.
Well, Dr. Larry, that was fantastic. Just love the whole concept that you have about childhood and how to rear children more holistically. Truly wish you were around when I was raising children and had you as a pediatrician.
I'll tell you something, Angela. Somebody wrote in the chat. I just want to address it really fast. Can this be fixed? And I will tell you yes. Because I was one of those kids that had an amazingly brilliant forebrain and an amazingly developed fight or flight traumatic hindbrain and very little midbrain. So I understand the amount of anxiety and the amount of fear that goes into going into areas of life that you have no idea about. And so just to crystallize something I said, Angela, and then I'll turn it back to you. In order to get out of the hindbrain, that child must be comfortable with the unknown and uncertainty. And for someone who stays in a state of panic, fear, the only way to get out of that, because you can't rationalize it, because that's entering the brain through the front. The only way to get through it is to really develop a curiosity and a safety at the same time. And when I have kids in the office, 4 or 5 years old, who I go to bring on the scale and they start fighting, no, I hold their hand and I basically say, I'm going to have the experience with you and then see if there's reason to cry. Right? So I don't explain it. I share the experience with them. I said, how about we do the experience and see what happens? Curiosity, safety. They do it and they're fine. So it really requires curiosity and safety and the ability to allow for unknown and uncertainty to be okay. And as a kid, I didn't have that. And just to be a little personal here, as a kid, I had insight and information and intellect and knowledge. My parents had no idea what to do with me because I was dropped in from Hogwarts in a Muggle home. But there were a lot of things that I didn't know how to do. And I designed my life to stay away from the things I didn't know how to do. Until life said, you got to start figuring these things out. And so it was very traumatic for me to go into a curiosity because I didn't do well with unknown and uncertainty. So that part of my toddlerhood where I explore into the unknown because everything is magical, that wasn't developed in me. And so I had to develop that as an adult. So now I'm so curious about so many things because I've done so much work to know that I will be okay in unknown and uncertainty. Because if I get it wrong, I'm okay. And that most of my life, I didn't know that for whatever reason. And so, yes, it could be healed, but it really requires a lot of work, inner work, to give yourself the ability to get out of curiosity and make it safe enough so that you can go into the unknown and the uncertainty. And when we create all the answers, when we create all the fixing, and when we do all the essays for college, and when we do all the answers for school, we keep the kid in the hindbrain because the kid never goes in to unknown to see how the kid would figure it out, him or herself. Thanks, Angela.
Thank you, Dr. Larry. We're going to start with questions that we have from our attendees. Ricky, do you have a question you want to start with?
Yes, I would like to start with the first question because it says, Dear Dr. Palevsky, could you say how the process goes if the infant is born blind or deaf? Thank you.
So I sort of answered that because I saw the question. So thank you, Rike. The
Okay.
child, God giveth and God taketh away. And we are always blessed with gifts when we have things that we seemingly for others don't have. And someone who is blind and deaf has other sensory development that is pretty powerful. And so that child is going to develop those strengths. Just like I saw a video of someone who was born without arms, and yet he uses his feet to build things, to draw, to paint, construction, put floors down, right? So there are ways to compensate. And so many of the other sensory inputs like smell, taste, and feel are going to be developed more powerfully. And I want to speak to the sixth sense, which I didn't talk about, which kids have. These kids have them. And that's really the spirit that I'm talking about, is the kids have a greater connection to spirit. And certainly a child who's blind and deaf may have a greater connection, but we have to be careful with how many things we do in the world to squelch that sixth sense. And that does include the foods we eat, the injections we give, the dyes, preservatives, additives, food colorings, pesticides, herbicides, fluoride, mercury, aluminum, lead. That does include the apps, the social media, the electromagnetic radiation, the devices, and it does include parenting that doesn't allow the child to go through the process of growth and development, him or herself. And so if we really want to look, our connection to our higher selves can be accessed through the frontal cortex, because our awareness becomes even greater when we've quieted the hindbrain and we flooded the forebrain to stay open. And that's what happens through meditation. Through meditation, you open up the forebrain, and that does raise levels of awareness way beyond what we are doing when we're in action. So, and kids have it. I mean, I've worked with a couple of children who are non-speaking, developmentally delayed kids, and I connected to their spirits in such a way that one family didn't come back because they had, in the 8 years that that kid was alive, they'd never had the interactions with that kid that I had with the kid in the office. Because I created connection. I acknowledged the kid. I intuited what the kid was feeling in the moment and repeated it back. Because children who are nonverbal are not stupid. They're just nonverbal. But their brains are still developing, their emotions are still developing, their heart is still developing. And so all I did was speak to the higher self of the child. The child related to me. We were communicating, we were going back and forth, the child felt safe. And we tend to rip that away when we start giving the answers, correcting the kids, fixing the problems, solving everything, because we don't allow that magic to explode. We don't allow the wow to happen, because we've got to get in the way first. And I often say that children are on the road of their lives, and the parents are the guardrails helping to guide the road. But if you get on the road, you're going to crash. So get off the road. There are times when the child may, go over the guardrail. And that's your job. Take the child, put the child back onto the road, and let the child get up and go. But get off the road. And I don't see that happening. And it worries me. I haven't seen it for over 20 years, maybe 30. And that's why I think we're dealing with the level of anxiety and depression, not just COVID. I don't think COVID did it. COVID topped it off, but I don't think COVID did it. But that's what's happening when we fix, solve, correct, and answer. And we don't let the kids struggle. And we give them everything they want, and they have nothing to struggle for. They have nothing to try. They don't have to work at anything. They just get everything they want. And all of you who are my age or older know that life is not about getting everything you want. Life is about 50% of the time not getting what you want. And these kids, and maybe more, right? But these kids don't know that. And we are robbing them of truth. And we're robbing them of brain development. And we're robbing them of consciousness because they will struggle to reach their potential. And they're never going to meet people like their parents who are going to fix, solve, answer, and correct, because nobody's got time for that. And that's not relationship at all.
Thank you for that. We have another question. When the child, like the 3-year-old you spoke about, is in story, are they demonstrating a sense of self-importance and wanting to belong by encouraging feedback?
Absolutely. The 3-year-old is one of the reasons children, first of all, one of the reasons children ask questions is not for you to give them the answer. In fact, more often than not, children don't want the answer. All they want is your heart. They don't want attention. They want connection. Very big difference. They want your presence. They want acknowledgement. They want, I hear you, buddy. I understand, sweetie. I'm listening. I'm right with you. I'm with you. So these are things that children need, not attention, connection. The children who are telling the story are developing I. And they want your connection. They really want you to be focused on them because they're the most important thing in the world. And they should be for the second. But that doesn't mean you can't say, wow, that's great. Listen, I loved hearing that story. I have to go to the bathroom right now. These are relationship interactions that must happen. But that kid saying that story full of me, 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 me.
Okay, I go with the next question. Yes. So, what can you advise about nurturing the child's spirit as they enter puberty after having an unsettled childhood?
Well, unsettled is a very a broad term. The thing is that any child must have and feel safe. And that's the job of the adult around the child to create safety. And it's situation specific, so I can't get into any details about the child. But we must create safety, and we must create safety for the child to explore, and for the child to be curious, and for the child to get things wrong. And it brings me back to the younger child, because the adolescent is the same. Little kids have to lie because that's part of the storytelling. And they need to know that it's safe to tell the truth. And that's a very difficult thing because the parent, I want you to learn your manners. I want you to learn the right way. Well, actually, That's never going to work. And what is going to work is, listen, I just need you to understand that I won't get you in trouble if you tell me the truth. I will be upset if you continue to lie to me. So your choice, because I'll get the answer anyway, which all parents do. They get the truth anyway. So it's really important to create safety and create curiosity for that adolescent. It's very, very important. That's the best I can say because I don't know what the unsettledness is from.
Well, that was a great answer given the circumstances of the question. Another question that we have is that people see young mothers using a mobile phone as a babysitting, kind of a pacifier for a child in a stroller. Is this a disadvantage to the child's development?
I think the person who asked the question knows the answer. So this is one of those, I would go back, as I do with kids, and say, well, what do you think? Because the answer is in the question. Otherwise, you wouldn't have asked the question. 100%. So I'm going to say something deeper than that. Comfort in life exists. Discomfort in life exists. Neither lasts. And when we parent our kids, we want to make sure comfort never ends and discomfort never happens. And so when a kid is uncomfortable or distressed, giving them something is a distraction. It's a disconnection. It's not a connection. And it's a pacification, it's a medication. It basically says, you don't have to be uncomfortable. I'm going to make sure that I give you something that makes you feel better. So what you basically do is you give an object as a reward instead of your heart. And if I look at the idea of addictions again, what is the pain deeply underneath people who have addictions? Lack of connection. And so I don't recommend stopping the discomfort, because when a child is in tantrum or when a child is in a frustration, in that moment, they believe they are going to die because the energy and the behavior of a tantrum is, I'm not going to make it. It's pure adrenaline, pure survival, pure fight or flight. The world is ending. And the only way to deal with that situation constructively is to allow the child to experience that what they're feeling has a beginning, has a middle, and has an end. So that they will wake up out of the hysteria and go, I made it. I didn't die. I'm okay. Actually, life is good. And that's how we get kids not to have anxiety. And that's how we can potentially prevent addictions, by being present and saying, yeah, I know. Like when I have kids in the office who are having angry fits, I look at them and say, okay, go ahead, express your anger. I'm okay with that. Let it out. And almost every kid looks at me and stops, because I acknowledge them. I connected. Yeah, I could see that you're angry. Go ahead, be angry, let it out. I'll wait for you. And the best example I can give to you is a number of years ago, I had a 3-year-old boy in the office and a 1-year-old, and I was doing the appointment for the 1-year-old. And the 3-year-old wanted to go out of the office. And we all said, well, I didn't say no. The parents said no, because I never use the word no with kids. Now I opened up another can of worms, but I never use the word no. And even in my 30s, when I was a pediatrician running an intensive care unit, I was giving talks to parents of toddlers, positive ways to say no. I was like 35, 36 when I was doing it. And I'll go back to it if you really want, how to positive ways to say no without saying no. And the 3-year-old wanted to go out, and the parents said no. And the kid had a tantrum, threw himself on the floor. And as soon as he threw himself on the floor, discomfort, the mother impulsively, oh, I have crayons for you. And I looked at her in my New York style and said, what are you doing? And of course, she jumped back because, I went at her. And I looked at the kid and I said, I know, buddy. I acknowledged him. I know, this is tough. I acknowledged him. I know you really want to go outside. I get it. I need you to stay here. I parented him. I acknowledged him and I parented him. And then he cried a little more. And I said, yeah, I know. This is so hard, but I can't let you go outside. And he stopped. Beginning, middle, end. Done. And he had the experience. And then he played the rest of the time. And what I did was I acknowledged him. I understand what you're feeling. And I'm going to tell you, I know what you're feeling, which is what I did with the children who were non-speaking autistic. And then I said, and I'm the parent here. I'm the adult in the room. And I have to adult you. It's just the way it is. I didn't give him a medication to make him feel better so that the pain would go away, which is what addictions are. And so I gave him connection. And connection is all about acknowledging. And the example that I give, and many people in the audience are going to know this, the example is I give, and it's a very men are from Mars, women are from Venus example. Husband comes home, wife starts screaming at him. He says, stop yelling. Anybody know what the next move is? I mean, she's going to go nuts on him, right? How is that any different than telling your kid, get away from there, stop that, don't do that? It's the same thing. So the mother's going to get the same result from the kid that the father gets when he comes home and he says, stop yelling. So then I look at the audience and I say, what if the father came home and the mother was screaming at him? And he said, I acknowledge you. He says, wow, honey, I could see you're really upset. Acknowledge. But I can't listen to you if you're yelling at me. And he parented himself. So that's a shared experience. That's a non-merged shared experience. You're a person, I'm a person. I hear you, but this is what I got. And that's what I did with the kid. I get it, buddy. I understand. And this is how we build relationship. This is not parenting. This is relationship. I get it. I know. But I'm not letting you go outside. And the famous positive ways to say no lecture that I gave in the mid to late 90s. A mother raised her hand and said, my 3-year-old, I say no to him. And every time I say no to him, he does this to me. No, 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 no. And I said to her in a room full of dozens of parents, good for him. And the reason I said that is because kids learn by modeling. They don't learn by what you tell them. So stop yelling doesn't work. Get away from there doesn't work. No, don't do that doesn't work. But when I'm in the office, I use language of shared experience and authority, not authoritarian, but authority. Hey, buddy, I'm not going to let you play with that. You. You. I'm in charge. I'm parenting you. I'm taking you away from this toy. Scream, scream, scream. I know. Go ahead, scream. Get mad at me. I'm not letting you play with this toy. Scream, 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 scream. Yeah, I know. This is tough, but I'm not going to let you play with the toy. And then the kid stops and moves on, beginning, middle, end. And it happens because I stand in my authority, not in my tyranny. And the other side of the tyranny, which I just want to address, is the parent who says, please put your coat on, okay? That's not parenting. That's basically saying to the kid, can I be your parent? Now, I understand the parent wanting to be gentle, but that's gentle to the point of taking away your parenting, your authority. And it comes from not wanting to say, put your coat on, which again is tyranny. It's authoritarian. So what's the authoritative way? Here's your coat. I need you to put it on. Or I'm putting my coat on. Here's your coat. Shared experience. And we will if we did that in relationship with each other, kids would get it. Because kids learn by modeling. They don't learn by what you tell them. Nobody learns by what you tell them. That's why COVID was such a disaster. Because nobody learned by what you told them. They had to experience it themselves. But people will learn if you share your experience. Instead of telling them they're wrong and just saying, okay, I hear you, but I just need you to know I feel differently. Somebody just wrote, where were you 45 years ago? Trust me, nowhere near the concepts and the heart that I'm sharing with you now. Oh my God. 45 years ago, I was 18, 17, 18. No. You want me now.
Okay, Angela, I have a question. We do another question, or we're now for an hour?
Go ahead. Sure, go ahead.
Okay, good. So here is, do you have any suggestions of how to help a 4-year-old little boy with a speech impediment deal with being teased without resorting to his little fists? I watched his little face and could tell he was heartbroken when that other child told him he was stupid because he didn't talk like some of the other children.
Oh, that's tough.
Yeah.
That's tough because there are multiple things that need to happen. All right. The other parent needs to get involved. The parent of the kid that did the shaming. This requires a multi-step process. But for the kid who was shamed, number one, his feelings must be acknowledged. I know that really hurt, didn't it? And then wait. That's where the magic happens. The magic happens in the silence. I know, buddy. That didn't feel good. And once the child gets over the emotion of it, you might be able to say something creative like, how do you think we should handle this the next time? What would you want to say to the kid if you could? What would you have wanted to have done around you? Would you have wanted other adults to help you? Again, not in succession. I'm just being creative right off the top of my head. Because the child needs to know that you're creating safety. But we all must be held in our hearts first. Honey, I could see you're really upset. I know you're angry. And I can't listen to you if you yell at me. I had a hard day too. And that evens the playing field. It's really important. And this is not something any of us really learned, right? We're much more reactive. We're much more triggered. And I had to learn this out of a state of trigger and reactivity and anger and excitement and impulse. So it's a learned process, but it requires a lot of repetition. And that kid needs a lot of nurturing. And that 4-year-old also needs situations where his confidence is boosted, where you as the adult are able to put him in situations where he feels good about himself, where not because you tell him he's good, but because he has the experience. Yes, I did it. Because that's what 4-year-olds need. That's what 44-year-olds need. It's what we all need.
Well, Dr. Larry, this has been absolutely magical. You've come up with such beautiful ways of telling us how to really empower the spirit of a child. Any closing words? We have many people here who are working on humanitarian projects that involve parenting and children. Are there ways that maybe your philosophy can be incorporated in that?
Yeah, I mean, look, as you know, Angela, I do a lot of things in pediatrics. This is my bread and butter, because this, to me, is how we're going to change the consciousness of the world. We're only going to change it if we model something different, right? And so it's our jobs to create those who are going to model it. So if I can be involved in helping to model it, look, I'm not the only one who knows this, and I'm not the top of the pyramid. There are other people who probably either just as good or better. I don't care. It's a group effort, because if we don't start parenting differently, if we don't start teaching parents to look at a child who's struggling and change the way the parent deals with it and allows for a beginning, a middle, and an end, we're not going to have kids who grow up confident and able to figure things out. And we're not going to have kids who grow up into adults who are able to critically think. And they, for those who are conspiracy theorists, they don't want us to critically think.
Well, again, I want to thank you on behalf of Connecting Consciousness for sharing all your wisdom from many years of practice in pediatrics and your own experiences. And to everyone, thank you for joining us this evening. And we hope you'll join us again on our next Worldwide Voices.
Thank you.